Hello, my name is Klein, and I work for Palmer Middle School. I'm going to be going over the results of the math scores on the Georgia milestones for the past 3 years, starting in 2016-17, ending in the 2018-19 milestone test. Last few years there has not been any testing due to some of the COVID restrictions and postponing of the test. So I'm going to go over that data with you, and I hope you enjoy. The purpose of this analysis is to look really over those 8th grade student scores on the Georgia milestone and comparing to the district. We're going to look at some of the subgroups. We're going to focus on some of the gaps they have between some minority groups, maybe the ELL groups, economically disadvantaged, and then we're going to discuss what we can do overall for these groups in the future to close those gaps. Some of the things you definitely want to consider when we preview this data is when we look at the math team, like what are the strengths of them? What do they do really well? What interventions have they done that were really successful for those students? Did they use proper techniques? Did they use success block? What do they do to help them? Are there other interventions that we can look at and other interventions that we can consider to close those gaps? And then, of course, are there any subgroups that are performing really low when we look at them compared to the other groups of their peers? First slide of data we're going to look at is just the overall demographic data of the students. That is the enrollment. We broke it down by gender. Pretty even split between the male and the female. You can see the male on the right being in the blue, green being the female green. And then overall, the enrollment pretty steady, a little bit of a drop, but nothing too drastic overall. We're going to now look at the same enrollment, the 1006 to the 1001 to 959. We're going to look at it by race and ethnicity. Overall, it's predominantly white school. As you can see, the overall 3-year white race did increase. Multiracial, somewhat small, but no significant drops. Hispanic is the same, kind of staying in that 188 to 201 range, no dramatic drops. Black has dropped a little bit. We started at 289, standing at 269. As we look at some of the other subgroups, Asian, Pacific Islander, along with American Indian, those usually lower, but that's kind of standard any school you will look at. Now when we look at our student subgroup data population, this is very important for this data because this is really something we want to focus on. We're going to start out with the student with disabilities. Most of these students are going to fall into that special ed care category, but we do have some handicapped, physically disabled, but the majority of them are going to be more of our special ed students. And you can see pretty much a standard, 18% on the average, 19, 18, 17. When we look at our ELL population, okay, that has gained, starting at 4%, going all the way up to 9%, so almost doubled in those years. And then the same for economically disadvantaged, always kind of standing in that 45, 41, 44 range, no major significant drops there. This information will be very important when we look at data for their math scores. Interesting piece of data I want to look at is the teachers that have been at the school. Overall, you can see the teacher population predominantly female throughout the years. Usually males are not a large population of middle school teachers, and it's actually dropped from 15 to 10 over the 3 years. When we look at the race, most of the teachers that do teach at Palmer are white, and a very small group of black, no Hispanic teachers at all, and just one Asian teacher. Years of experience I thought was real interesting because every school is going to have those new teachers, but you do want those teachers that have taught for a while. And you have that very, very large number of Palmer teachers kind of teaching that 11 to 20 year range. So you do have a lot of experience at this school. When it comes to the education level, once again, you have a good number amount of teachers that of Palmer do have their masters, which is interesting. You do have a few even that got their specialist, but you do have a higher education level for the teachers that are going to be helping these students with their math. All right, let's get right to the scores then. Here we are. We're going to look at, like I said, specifically here, the 8th grade students taking the Georgia milestones in math. And we're going to look at two charts here. On the left, we have Georgia, and on the right, we have Cobb County. And if you look at overall, we're going to go from right to left, starting in 2016 to 17, the student scores have increased. That blue is the proficient, which is the really one you want to look at, and obviously distinguished too. That blue and the green are a really good score, what you want. And when we end up in 2018 and 19, you have Palmer at 51% of the students proficient and 12.6 distinguished, doing much, much better than the actual entire county. So I thought that was a really nice number to look at. When you look at students that are not in the beginning range, we only had 6%, where county had 11. Comparing Georgia to the state, even much, much better. Cobb County does overall versus the state. On the left, we have Palmer again, the same data we just looked at. And on the right over there is the state of Georgia. State of Georgia has some gaps there when you have 21% of your kids beginning, 43% developing. Palmer is nowhere near that. So I think Palmer, comparing them to the county and obviously the state, is doing an excellent job overall with their milestone math scores. Big goal of Palmer is to have students be proficient, distinguished. We really want to push those kids up high. And Palmer had more 8th grade students in the proficient distinguished category than both the county and the state over the last 3 years. Like I said, when we look at that little graph I made here, you got Palmer. That line graph is going to be that blue. I mean, you can see obviously going upwards. You always want that line going up. Cobb did go up also, but obviously not as much. And then the state in gray kind of flat line there, 34.5, 34.5, and 35. Not much of a gain at all. That state gain has nothing to do with Palmer, because Palmer clearly did their job getting up to 63.6%, from 52, a nice gain of 11.6. We're going to break it down by subgroups now. We're going to look at the by race, right? So we got our, the blue is going to be the 2016-17, the light green is the 17-18, and the last one, the peach, is the 18-19. And when we look at the proficient distinguished by race, whites and the Hispanic group saw a significant increase. Unfortunately, 8 African Americans did decrease. So right off the bat, you go from 46 to 33 to 46, kind of jumping all around there. Kind of want to look at what's going on there. You can see the white made a significant jump from 57 to 77. Same with Hispanic, from 48 to 60, making a 12% increase. So some good scores there. Just kind of question marking when it went from 46 to 33 to 46, almost like an outlier at that point. When we look at it by gender, all right, the gender is going to be the female and the male. Females outscoring the males every year. You can see in 16-17 there was a big jump, a big gap from 60 to 47. The men closed that gap by the end, kind of only down by about 3.5% there, 4% almost, from 65.5 to 61.8. I'm going to do some comparing here, once again, with the middle school Palmer to Cobb County overall. And when you look at the proficient distinguished category for students with disabilities, and I said earlier, this is going to be mostly special ed students, but you do have some handicap too. And you can see comparing to Cobb, Palmer's numbers aren't huge, only having 56 total students, 45 total students, and 52 as we progress through the years. But once again, Palmer being the blue, Cobb being the peach, you can see Palmer by the end, 18-19, had a massive jump, going from 21.4, which is better than the county. Unfortunately, going a little bit lower, 17.8, which is still above the county, but barely. But then going from 17.8 to 44.2, making a significant jump there. That's something that Palmer teachers really need to be proud of when they look at this data, because that's a significant jump, significant increase, and really doubling up on Cobb County. Wonderful job there. Palmer students with disabilities versus the Palmer students without disabilities. Unfortunately here, this is a group we got to look at. They close the gap a little bit, but still lower. So when you look at, the years, students non-disabilities, we're at 69%, only 44 for those students, but jumping from 17 to 44 was great as opposed to the 59 to 60 jump at the non-MAID, but still significant increases that they should be really, really proud of. We're going to look at now the county Cobb versus Palmer. When we look at the economically disadvantaged kids, all right, Palmer had similar demographics overall to Cobb when it comes to these students that are economically disadvantaged. The Palmer 8th grade students outperformed Cobb in the proficient and distinguished categories overall. So not significantly, but you can see that the 45, 40, 50, 1.9%, that little bar graph made on the bottom there, where Cobb's was kind of flatlined 27, 28, 30. So a pretty hefty, a significant one, 21% increase, or 21% better than the disadvantaged students, economically disadvantaged students in the county. And then when we look at the non-disadvantaged, economically disadvantaged students to the economically disadvantaged students at Palmer, the economically disadvantaged students did a little bit lower at 51.9 as opposed to 73.3. Not really closing the gap, but increases have been made. So overall, I want to look at the strengths as we wrap this up. High number of 8th grade students proficient, distinguished, much better than the county, much better than the state. You can see students with disabilities, big jump from 25 to 42 to 25, right? And then the overall increase of 11% over that 3-year level. I think some opportunities that Palmer needs to look at are students with disabilities are going to be, they're consistently lower than the non-disability kids. We need to look at that. The white and Hispanic scores have increased, but African Americans really haven't, so we need to look at that. And the economically disadvantaged students at Palmer have scored lower, so definitely need to look at that thing. So as we look at our next steps to take, as I present this to the administration, look at the questions at the beginning of this PowerPoint and discuss those. Let's create an action plan to target these subgroups that are scoring lower, and let's discuss some possible causes why these students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged, African Americans, why are they scoring maybe lower than the other ones? I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope it came across well, and the data doesn't lie, and overall I think Palmer's doing a wonderful job. Thank you.